How's it going, everyone? What you're going to see today is a pretty good tank run. This is a good tank run I had. I definitely have my highest kill streak to date from this round. To me, it was a good run. It shows patience. It shows timing. It shows the keys that you need to use with regard to success with tanks. And the reason I wanted to talk about, well, the gameplay itself was good, so I was going to post it regardless. But the thing is, I get a lot of private messages asking about tanks. A lot of people in the comment section don't usually ask me about tanks and tank gameplays and expect me to show them. But a lot of people send me private messages like, what's the best loadout for tanks? What's the best strategies to use with tanks? And usually in the past I'd refer them to one of my how to drive a tank commentaries tutorials that I did a long time ago. But recently I went back into it and I looked at it, and I showed in it when I actually reviewed it through again. I noticed that as much as a lot of the information still applies with strategies, a lot of the information that that was in that tutorial in the past is pretty much outdated now because of all of the recent updates that have come out, and the fact that Battlefield 3 is pretty much a finished product now. So the information that I share with you now is pretty much going to be applied throughout the rest of this game's life cycle. So yeah, with regard to that, I'll get into strategies I use and tips with regard to loadouts I like to use with tanks for success. And it's a bit different than console, I'll tell you that. I had to change some things around for max success. But basically, yeah, quickly speaking, this is a 39-1 round, so it's good. And I think the max kill streak's like 34, 35, something like that. So it's a good illustrative video to show you what I'm talking about. Well, basically, and you have to play it a bit different. The first and number one rule I usually use for tanks is to always be patient. And you'll see it in the chats coming up soon. One of the idiots on my team decided, "Oh, tank, you should push up. Tank, this is boring. Tank, push up." And like, there he is, I think. And strictly speaking, especially in Conquest, because we have the majority of flags, everyone already knows that as long as you hold the majority of flags and you push them off of choke points, which I'm doing here, and you see I'm pillaring with the tank, I'm staying behind cover for the majority of my tank. And that way, not only am I a hard target, but even if he hits me, I'll be at an angle where damage reduction's at the least. Because hitting a tank on its sides of the back, like everyone knows, are its weak points. But in addition to that, if you hit the tank, see how I'm on a slight angle? If he hits me on an angle, that's he'll absolutely get his least damage output as possible. If he hits me at a 90-degree angle at any side, then absolutely that'll be max damage output. So if you're at an angle immediately, that's reducing his damage. And the other thing too is with regard to loadouts. Tier 1, and I'll finish the pillaring explanation, but if you pillar here and you control this choke point, as long as they don't get C and pass C, which they eventually do with the chopper, as you'll see, because they were pretty smart with that aspect. As long as you continually hold your two flags in your base and the middle base of C here, you'll bleed the tickets down and win. And that's what I was trying to emphasize to that guy in the chat, that if you hold the majority of flags, you don't need to push up, especially since nobody on their team is past this medium C point. So me pushing up with the tank into what is certainly going to be a ton of support guys, people with engineers with javelins and RPGs, and the other tank is stupidity. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize. I see too many people either get greedy or they don't think that it'll happen to them. They push up too far, and next thing you know, they're disabled. And if you're disabled and in a choke point of the enemy base at this particular point here, like see where well, that Jeep was, but further up, if you go past that point and you're disabled, you're done. C4 guys will get you, or RPGs in the tank will obliterate you. And when your tank is down, that's probably on average, unless it's a fast respawn server, that's 90 seconds of time that the enemy can push you, especially if they have the tank, because they'll just blow through your infantry if the tank's not a stupid driver. So you don't want to give up positioning. Battlefield's a game of positioning, and that's one thing I've noticed, that there's a huge difference with regard to console versus PC. PC's all positioning. With regard to console, you can get away with a lot because you'll have less encounters. You push through a guy or two where you don't expect them to be, and next thing you know, you're pushing their flag. PC's a lot more different. There's a lot more players, and the smarter players know that it's a game of positioning as well. So you have to pick your time, you have to pick your moments, and ideally you use them at times where you have support from your teammates. You make one gigantic push, you make up the ground, you capture the flag, and you don't let them retake it. That's the key to winning, especially Conquest. Rust is a bit different, but Rust is the same principles apply for positioning. If you're attackers, you push continually to try to keep them back from the MCOMs, and then once you actually plant an MCOM, you just stick on it, and you don't let them push forward. And defense is basically the same. You just try and push them further and further back to where they're attacking bases. But yeah, I'll get back into the tanks now, because I get sidetracked a bit with strategy, but it's basically the same thing. With regard to my loadouts that I use, on console I always used proximity scan, because for the most part you'd always know that there was a tank, you'd always know that there might be an LAV depending on the map, but other than that you had to account for support players and RPGs. In Battlefield PC you have to account for all of those in pretty much every match. So as long as you have a gunner with you, and having a gunner is unbelievable help, because he'll not only spot for you, he'll take out your threats to your side and your flanks, to your rear. Everything helps. Having a gunner is crucial, especially if you team up with you having reactive armor and him having proximity scan. But basically that's what I was going into. On PC I always play with reactive armor. It's an incredible skill to have. And I feel in PC you absolutely need it. Just because there's so many more players, there's so many more chances for the enemies to continually hit your flanks, and you wouldn't know. So having reactive armor is huge. The other thing too is you'll notice a lot of the time is that when you have reactive armor and it does get spent, make sure that you get into an area that's secluded from danger, and make sure that before you go back and attack again, that you get out and you heal your tank past that limit a bit more. Because you'll see it in the HUD right next to Cannon AP or HMG 50 here, that my reactive armor on my HUD is down on my right side, but on my rear and my left side it's intact. The HUD can be glitched at times, I've heard, but for the most part, if you switch to third-person view, you'll always see that whether your reactive armor is still attached or not. You can see it on the bottom left corner when I turn. Bottom right, it's not attached. Bottom left, when I turn my turret, you'll see it is attached. But make sure that before you go into an encounter, you get out and you heal your tank on the side the reactives you want to heal for like 2 to 3 seconds past what you'd normally reach 100 at. And you'll notice when you switch to third person view, your reactive's back. And that's my point. Always make sure before you go into an encounter that your reactive's back to full. The last thing you want to encounter is 2 consecutive rockets that happen to hit you at perfect 90-degree angles on the one side you don't have reactive and you're disabled. Just don't get lazy with it. Take your time, be patient, always make sure your reactive's up, and I'd absolutely emphasize using reactive on PC. The next tier is some people prefer thermal sights, and in a map like Domovan Peak in the tunnels here, where there's a ton of infantry and you'd like to try to spot them, I could see where it comes in handy. They'll light up and you get to shoot them. Problem being for me is any javelins, softlims, or third-person seat in the tank that happens to designate you laser designation, or even the attack helicopters. Especially because in this map you're in the tunnel, you're not really going to have a ton of locks. But on every single other map, like say Operation Firestorm, well, anything, Gulf of Oman, anything with tanks where you're outdoors for the most part, jets, helicopters, scout helicopters, javelins, everything I was talking about that can laser designate, you have to break those locks. Otherwise, you're a sitting duck. Because all it takes is one javelin to knock you really close to being disabled, or anything like a guided shell or a guided rocket from a helicopter knock you down. So basically, with the points I've already emphasized here, always choose IR smoke. The other thing too, a lot of people forget about IR smoke is that you can actually use it if you're losing a tank battle. If you pop IR smoke, it makes you a difficult target to acquire, or you can even use it as a flanking technique. Pop the IR smoke and then go around and hit the tank in the side or the rear, and you can win a match that suddenly you probably weren't favored to win in the first place. The next third tier one I always use is the HMG. Obviously it's preference. I used to use the canister shell all the time in my previous tutorial, but the problem with the canister shell obviously is that because they nerfed it, where you have to actually wait for each shot to recycle and reload, there's no real reason to use it anymore. It's not a key strength point anymore. So obviously I use the HMG. And the HMG, because it actually damages non-armored vehicles pretty well, like attack helicopters. But in addition to that, it has no cooldown. It has great damage output and no cooldown, where the LMG has a much faster fire rate, but there's a cooldown for it. And here's an example of me buffing my reactive armor again. But that's basically the loadout that I use all the time. I always use IR smoke, thermal... no, I don't use thermal. I use reactive armor, I use IR smoke, and I always use the HMG. That's my favorite loadout for tanks. And with this build, and like I was saying earlier, if you have a gunner with you that's able to spot enemies, or he has proximity scan as his tier, you get the best of both worlds, where everything gets highlighted and you have reactive for an additional 4 shots. The other thing too that I didn't mention with reactive, but I'm sure most of you have already probably seen the tutorial of it, or you know already of to do it, is that if you're in a tank battle, continually rotate your tank, because the thing is, for the most part, if he can shoot your turret, every once in a while he might get lucky with the one-hit disable. But if he's hitting the front of your tank or the turret, that's going to take probably at least 3 to 4 shots to really do a ton of damage to you. But if he's hitting the body of your tank, which a lot of tankers seem to do for some reason, if you continually rotate your tank, outside of the front, you'll have 3 additional shots where your reactive armor will absorb it. Just make sure you don't expose your back longer than the 1 additional shot, otherwise all of your timing and rotating of the tank will be completely useless when it's a one-hit disable. So yeah, continue. And the other thing too is, besides pillaring, which I use here, and besides keeping these particular spots for Conquest as the example here, always keep your tank moving, especially if you don't have a gunner that has proximity scan on, because it makes you a much tougher target. And the other thing too is, in addition, the last thing you want is some support player with C4 coming out of nowhere to actually take you out. So make sure you keep moving at all points, even if you're just back and forth. And the other thing too is, as much as I didn't do it as much here, switching to third-person view when things seem too quiet, or things seem to be going a bit too easy, can give you a nice view of what's around your tank. So don't forget, always switch to third person every once in a while if you're not completely sure, or if you saw a teammate go by and you wasn't completely sure he was a teammate, switch to third person and verify. Always helps. But those are basically the tank tips I use. To sum up quick, you've already heard my build. Pillar, and use your cover as much as possible. It doesn't have to be anything intricate. You can use a pillar there in the middle. You can use just about anything as cover. You can even use your own teammates' jeeps if they're ahead of you as cover. Like, yeah, they'll be disabled and probably dead, but hey, it's one shot off of you for his stupidity of driving too far up. So, always use cover where applicable. Always use IR smoke to break the locks. Pillar as much as possible. And the other thing is, sometimes I'll use proximity scan if I'm in an infantry-based map. But it depends. On PC, I'm always using reactive, like I was saying earlier, because there's just so many different threats, and you can't account for them all, and it's good to have a guardian angel like reactive armor to help you out. So that's the tips that I use. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think in the comment section. If you'd like me to do a full tutorial breakdown, despite the fact that I used most of my tips and tactics here, I can do that as well. I'll probably remake one for Battlefield 4 as well, but let me know what you think. I thought this was a pretty good round. See you later.